The Speaker wants to impeach me for political advantage in the 2026 governor's race. So then let's start the impeachment proceedings. I am calling on Speaker McCall and Mark McBride to begin their impeachment proceedings Monday.
Hello, Oklahoma. Welcome to Let's Pod This. It's Friday. It's hot outside. And Ryan Walters is laying down the gauntlet. I forget how much this song slaps. Oh, yeah, here we go. All right, this is why we have theme music for certain elected officials, like the state superintendent. As a reminder, that is the theme to Debbie Does Dallas, which we chose for State Superintendent Ryan Walters because he talks a lot about pornography in schools, baseless claims, entirely baseless claims. This song is way too cool for him, to be honest. But we're starting with that today because, doggies, listeners, what a week in Oklahoma government and politics. Mercy me. I don't even know where to start, really. It's been hot and heavy. It's been thick and bushy. It's coming at us really fast this week, and I think that maybe the best way to cover some of this is honestly to lean on our friends at Non-Doc. Big shout out to them. They have their 9th anniversary, 9th birthday, whatever you call it, if you're a news outlet, coming up soon, and you should definitely support them. I'll plug that again at the end of the show because we do lean on them quite a bit for doing the hard-hitting reporting that happens in this state, and not just them. Certainly, Oklahoma Watch, Oklahoma Voice, the Oklahoman, the Tulsa World, OKC Free Press, the Frontier, all kinds of really excellent news outlets here in our state. But because Non-Doc and Let's Fix This started around the same time, I probably have a little bit more affinity for them. Everyone, I love all my journalists equally. I didn't even mention the news stations, the TV stations. They're all great as well. But the other night, Non-Doc, in their infinite wisdom, I believe understood that this has been a rather tumultuous, notable history is being made week here in Oklahoma. And so they just laid it out day by day. And so I'm honestly I'll link to this in the show notes, of course, so you can read it yourself, but we're going to go through their list of what happened just this week. All centered around State Superintendent Ryan Walters, the Oklahoma State Department of Education, Epic Charter Schools, the AG is in there. It's just really been a lot. So let's back up to Monday. Non-Doc reported that Attorney General Gentner Drummond is concerned about how Ryan Walters handles, or rather doesn't handle, open records requests. And this is a big issue where there appears to be a mountain, dozens of open records requests that have been unfilled for quite a long time. Now, state law regarding open records requests does not give a specific time frame. We have wrestled with this 6 ways from Sunday about whether we should or should not have a time frame stipulated in the law. What the law says is that each public entity shall have someone on staff and available during regular business hours to fulfill records requests when they come in. If it cannot be immediately filled, then they have to fill them as quickly as they can. And that's the impetus. And the reason to not stipulate, that all requests shall be filled in 7 days is that sometimes a request could be filled in 1 day. And we don't want to leave the door open for everyone to just delay everything like a week, right? Like people will take the maximum amount of time available if it is given to them. And so regardless, it has been months, if not years, that the State Department of Education has not fulfilled some of these requests. There were carryovers from the previous administration, which Walters likes to, point a lot of fingers at them, but he hasn't filled those requests yet either. And so it's really adding up and is potentially, very potentially, a violation of state law. There's like 4 more things on Monday. That's just the first thing. M. Scott Carter from the Oklahoman published a story also on Monday showing that Walters and his agency, the State Department of Education, appear to be withholding state funds meant for schools to purchase inhalers. This is different. This is an entirely different line of funding than what I spoke at length about last week on the show. Last week is about school security funding. This week is about money to purchase inhalers. And that certainly adds on to, other funding concerns about last week, which we spoke about, that KFR reported on. The issue here with the inhalers, Walters and company said that they were going to do like a competitive bid for this, but they found out that it doesn't qualify under the Competitive Bidding Act, and so they were going to use a sole source contract, and that there's some kind of like bureaucratic reason they haven't done this yet. Mind you, most schools started yesterday. So like on the very week that school was starting in most of the state, and districts are like, hey man, we still haven't got our money for these inhalers. And then he's like, oh, well, you know what? We had a paperwork glitch with that. That was on Monday. Monday afternoon, 3 Republicans distributed a press release criticizing Walters for his recent remarks. These are all Republicans that criticized Walters' comments about the Bixby superintendent, the superintendent in Bixby schools. And those remarks were indeed pretty heinous. We'll come back to that in a minute. Monday night. This is still the first day of the week. Monday evening, rumors began swirling that House Republicans were circulating a petition asking Speaker Charles McCall to create a committee to investigate Walters. Dun, dun, dun. So that was just Monday, the very first day of the week. It's gone downhill from there. Tuesday, those rumors came true. The petition from House Republicans became public, and there was names of about 17 members who had signed it initially. It was authored by House Representative Mark McBride. He had 16 of his colleagues, all Republicans, signed on. I did a quick check of those 17 Republicans that initially signed the letter. Only 4 of them have an opponent this year, right? So only 4 of them actually have some skin in the game. 5 of them don't at all. 5 of them will be out of office this November. They either are term limited, like McBride, or they are not seeking re-election, or they lost in the primary. And so there's a potential for a special session for the next couple of months, but otherwise they're really out. So 5 don't have any skin in the game long term. 4 definitely do because they're on the ballot in November. And then the rest, that's 9. So the other, 8 are somewhere in between. They have either already won or didn't have an opponent at all. So I guess they've already won as well. They're essentially reelected, but they're mindful that their constituents care about this a lot. And I've heard from Republicans and Democrats alike that when they're out knocking doors for candidates this summer, the number one issue that keeps coming up door after door after door is none other than Ryan Walters. Can you imagine canvassing doors in Atoka, in Idabel, in Bixby, in Wellston, in Fort Supply, wherever you're knocking doors, and this guy's name keeps coming up, and you see the news too, you're irritated, you're frustrated, and then a voter says, what are you going to do about it? That's what I'm talking about. That's civic participation in action. Anyway, so the petition became public because it was submitted to the speaker. Mark McBride and crew submitted to the speaker, and even in the process of doing so, there were other Republicans who were signing on. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 21 to 26 had signed on at that point. Speaker McCall received it and publicly said, you know what? We're not doing anything until I have 51 Republicans sign on. Now, there's 20 Democrats in the state House. That means there's 81 Republicans. McCall is saying, I need a majority of the body, but they have to all be Republicans. So not even a majority of his caucus, just an actual majority of the House, but only from one party that are calling for this. And, when he gets to, let's say, 26 Republicans plus 20 Democrats, that's 46. That's really close to an actual majority of House members that are calling for some sort of investigation. They're not even yet calling for him to be ousted for office. They're just asking for someone, the legislature, who is in charge of, appropriating money to this agency, needs to look in and see what the hell is actually happening over there in the State Department of Education. And so McCall obviously didn't sign the petition himself, nor did his heir apparent, Representative Kyle Hilbert, who is the Speaker-elect. However, he did share some pretty harsh words about Walters. He said the rhetoric towards educators has to not only be toned down, but reversed. This past week, my daughter started kindergarten in public school, where I know she is loved and supported by phenomenal teacher and support staff. School districts across the state are back to school, but instead of talking about the excitement of a new year, we are discussing these issues due to the statements being put out by the State Department of Education. He went on, had other words, but that was I think this is a great opportunity for the Speaker-elect to really start honing his skills, showing his leadership among his caucus and around the House as well. And man, what a trial by fire. So that was Tuesday. So Monday you've got, hey, something's happening. These Republicans are not happy. Tuesday, boom, here's a list of them. We're adding more names every minute. Speaker, do something about it. Speaker says, nope, not yet. I need a whole bunch more. Come back to me. And then Speaker-elect's like, yeah, but listen, this is not okay. So this should, y'all got to stop. Keep getting names. Walters, knock it off, or we're going to have to do something about this. On Wednesday, Fox 25's Peyton May revealed that a letter sent by Secretary of Education Nellie Taylor Sanders, so this is not Ryan Walters, this is the Governor Stitt's cabinet official, who is the Secretary of Education, was a position that Walters previously held, that she questioned Walters on his, quote, lack of response to legislative questions about money appropriated for school security, which is what we talked about last week, right? So now you've got someone from the governor's cabinet saying, hey, I don't think that you are handling this well. You really should respond to the legislature and give them the information they're asking for. Don't just come out and grandstand against them. That's not okay. So that's 3 days. And then there was Thursday. And as I'm just going to read straight from non-doc, as the House budget chairman for the past 7 regular sessions, 7, that's half of his term, Representative Kevin Wallace has overseen historic investments into Oklahoma's public education system. He has also chaired the Legislative Office of Fiscal Transparency, or LOFT, which was formed 5 years ago in 2019 to provide lawmakers with stronger oversight opportunities for the dollars they dish out to agencies. So yesterday, Representative Wallace announced that due to concerns about how money is or is not flowing through the State Department of Education, he was going to launch a formal LOFT inquiry. Wallace says, quote, "This isn't about Superintendent Walters. This is about transparency of a state agency and getting answers for our constituents. When the legislature approves funding for a specific purpose, like school security or inhalers, it is incumbent on the agency to which those funds are allocated to spend them properly and in a timely manner. If there are issues with the disbursements being made, that information should be communicated to the legislature well before schools are encumbered." And so in a press release so Wallace announces, hey, we're doing this. And McCall is right there with him. McCall notes that his office would also be reporting information about the Open Records Act and Open Meeting Act issues to the Attorney General. Now, the AG is well aware of those issues, but now you're starting to see McCall talking to the AG, being like, hey, here's what we know about this. Because in some cases, this involves other legislators, right? A couple of weeks ago at the State Department of Education meeting, or the Board of Education meeting, they did not allow 3 legislators, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, to come into the executive session, even though it is explicitly allowed by law. So this appears to be a very clear violation of the Open Meeting Act or of that specific law that was passed. And in fact, Walters has asked the AG for an opinion on that, and the AG is like, yes, the law is very clear. You have to allow them in. Of course, he didn't. And it's like very well documented that he didn't. And in fact, they very clearly met to discuss things that were not on the, like there was multiple issues that to a lay person's eyes seem like a clear and present violation of the state law. So LOFT, the Legislative Office of Fiscal Transparency, as you may remember, is comprised of members from both chambers, House and Senate. So it's called bicameral. It is also bipartisan. There are members from both parties in both sides, and there are members from leadership in both sides. Now, it is a little unclear still how much the Senate members may participate because if this inquiry were to result in the House voting to impeach Superintendent Walters, right? An impeachment is not a conviction. It is just the House essentially like charging him with a crime, with some kind of wrongdoing. And then that goes to the Senate, and the Senate acts as a jury where they basically hold the trial and they would vote to remove him from office, right? The same thing happens in Congress with the president. And, President Trump was impeached twice. He was not removed from office, but he was charged, basically. It's kind of like a grand jury, but not secret and not exactly the same. But if you were familiar with the grand jury, you're probably already familiar with the impeachment process, and that's the best I can do in terms of a comparison. So that seems like, okay, so now Monday through Thursday, here's what we've seen. Right? Just to recap, we've seen that Walters has continued his antics. Republicans are upset. The AG's looking into things. Republicans have been collecting signatures, a petition for an investigation. And finally, by Thursday, Loft says, okay, we're going to investigate. And that's something, right? McCall has stopped short of saying we're going to impeach because really they have to investigate to determine what evidence is available to them on, like, did he violate any rules or laws? Like, is Walters guilty of something? Like, or is there enough, not guilty, is there enough evidence to charge him with wrongdoing? And if so, then they would move to a formal impeachment, which might just be a vote. And then that would go to the Senate for an actual trial on punishment, right? So we're a few steps away. But this felt enormous. This felt like a big deal. Except also on Thursday, early Thursday morning. First thing out of the gate, everyone woke up, checked Twitter, and saw that the superintendent from Bixby, Rob Miller, who I mentioned a few minutes ago, had filed a defamation lawsuit against Walters up in Tulsa County District Court. And the lawsuit is based on statements that Walter made after a July 31st State Board of Education meeting in response to Miller's comments on an alleged delay in passing federal funding on to local school districts. So again, districts across the state have been saying, hey, we're not getting the federal funding we normally get. And either that's because the State Department has not applied for it, or they did and they're just not giving it to us. Like, we don't know what's happening, but we don't have the money we need to run our school district for this year. And this year starts this week. Like, this is a BFD. It's a big fucking deal. So Superintendent Miller's attorney says in the petition, quote, in response to Superintendent Miller's legitimate inquiry, Defendant Walters maliciously attacked, slandered, and defamed Superintendent Miller in his individual capacity and his occupation as the superintendent of Bixby Public Schools by calling him a, quote, liar, an embarrassment, and a clown, and an untrustworthy steward of his school district's taxpayer funding. Now, those words, liar, embarrassment, clown, were in a big meeting. Everyone heard this. It was in a state board of education meeting. And basically, Superintendent Miller is saying, like, enough's enough, right? Like, we might disagree on some policy things. We might disagree on a lot of stuff. But you can't just be calling me names. You got to put some respect on my name. That's what Superintendent Miller is saying. Now, Superintendent Miller also happens to be a Marine Corps veteran, and so members of the Veteran Caucus in the House have issued statements questioning Superintendent Walters' quote, problematic leadership tactics. So a quote from their press release, as former military leaders, we know the qualities that define good leadership: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. Just as important are the lessons on how not to lead. Over the past 4 years, we've witnessed Ryan Walters' often questionable leadership. That's worth noting they say 4 years because he's only been in his current office for 2 years, but he was Secretary of Education before that. Back to the Veterans Caucus statement. In the past 2 weeks, he has violated the Open Meeting Act, denied legislators access to executive sessions, deprived districts of rolled over money meant for school safety, and is now putting children's lives at risk by withholding appropriated funds for emergency asthma inhalers. After Walters chose to name-call Bixby Superintendent Rob Miller, a former Marine who faithfully served the Constitution and protected our rights, we decided we couldn't sit back any longer. Though we do not speak for others, we cannot stand by while a respected leader and veteran is insulted and demeaned for simply doing his job. Walters' behavior is unbecoming of any leader, especially the highest-ranking person in the Oklahoma public school system. That's a hell of a statement. And it goes on, but I read all that because I think a key thing that we all have to keep in mind in this is that while there might be broad agreement among the public and even among the legislature that Superintendent Walters is bad at leadership and maybe even bad at his job, that does not necessarily mean that he has committed any crimes. It also doesn't necessarily mean that he's even eligible, committed an offense worthy of being removed for office, something like that, right? The last elected official to be removed from public office in Oklahoma was State Supreme Court Justice Napoleon Bonaparte Johnson, which is a hell of a name, who was impeached and removed from office during the 1965 Oklahoma Supreme Court scandal. So you can go Google that if you're interested. But it's been basically, 60 years since we have removed anyone from office. So this is not to be taken lightly. And good, we don't want a state where we are removing people from office every time we turn around. That's not what any of us want. Now, in the background this week, we learned from some excellent reporting that there has been some other communication, kind of normal communication behind the scenes between Walters and the AG and Speaker-elect Kyle Hilbert. So according to some email correspondence provided to NonDoc, Walters had a phone conversation with Speaker-designate Kyle Hilbert on Monday regarding legislative education funding questions. So this means that over the last month or so, Walters has asked for 3 different opinions from the Attorney General. And some of those he asked directly, some of those he asked through Hilbert. Why, I don't really understand. One of those is from after the July 31st State Board of Education meeting where Walters made those comments about Superintendent Ron Miller. Walters told reporters that he was going to request an AG opinion on whether and how legislators can exercise their statutory authority to view the State Board of Education executive sessions. Now, Drummond has, I'm going to play his music too. Whoa, I forgot how exciting it is. Hoo-wee! So A.G. Drummond has already said in an unofficial letter that the law requires the board to allow lawmakers to observe that closed door portion, the executive session portion of meetings. So he's already said it unofficially. The difference between an official and unofficial position or statement from the AG is that the official positions carry the weight of law, right? It's the same as a Supreme Court ruling. This is the law. It's a big deal. So just given like an advisory letter does not necessarily carry that same weight. But now we've got 3 potential gubernatorial candidates all messing around on the same issues. And that also brings us back to today. And today around 1 o'clock, or shortly before then, I was in a meeting with a number of our partner organizations, and somebody piped up in the Zoom chat and said, "Did you all just get this notification that Walters is holding a press conference at 1:15 to make a major announcement?" We all looked at each other. Some were in person, some were on Zoom. We said, "Any announcements? Let's wrap up this meeting and let's go." And so we did. So we closed the meeting down. Those of us who were able hopped in our cars and drove the approximately 5 minutes over to the state capitol. Got there just in time for Walters' presser. And I don't know what I was expecting. We assumed it was not going to be him resigning, but press conferences on Friday afternoons are always a little bit special. For one, there's very few people in the state capitol building. He did not hold this press conference at the Department of Education. He did not hold this press conference in the press room in the state capitol. They have a dedicated room for press conferences. It wasn't in there. He held this on the 4th floor in the rotunda just outside the House chambers, right? This was very careful staging, saying, "I'm going to stand here outside the door to the House, and I'm going to call on Speaker McCall to start impeachment proceedings on Monday." Here's an audio clip from that press conference.
What you've seen are political attacks directed at me from the Speaker of the House, Charles McCall, and his buddy, Mark McBride. They have continued to attack my office with baseless lie after baseless lie with no evidence. Oklahomans deserve a good education system. Oklahomans deserve the education reforms that we are bringing them in my agency. I will not continue to stand here and listen to Speaker McCall and Mark McBride lie about my office and lie about what the work we are doing. So what we've seen here is a clear political attack. And why are we getting that political attack? Because Charles McCall is more concerned about running for governor in 2026 than taking care of Oklahomans. This is a clear attack on who he views as his biggest political opponent in that governor's race in 2026. My focus is kids in the state of Oklahoma. I'm not worried about a future election. I'm worried about ensuring every kid has the best education possible. So because of that, I'm going to stand here today and say, if Charles McCall and Mark McBride want to continue to throw these baseless lies and accusations at me, they need to do 2 things. The first is they need to provide all of the evidence for these political lies to the Senate. The Senate should see what these accusations are and the evidence behind them. I will go ahead and cut to the chase. There is none. There is no evidence. These are political lies from the Speaker and Mark McBride. And then the next thing that they need to do, we don't need to wait. We do not need to wait on a loft committee. We do not need to wait on an investigation. It is time to start the proceedings immediately. The Speaker wants to impeach me for political advantage in the 2026 governor's race. So then let's start the impeachment proceedings. I am calling on Speaker McCall and Mark McBride to begin their impeachment proceedings Monday. It is time for Oklahomans to have the answers. I have provided them a record amount of information. I continue to provide their offices with a record amount of information and documentation. I want the people of Oklahoma to see everything that my agency is doing. I want the people of Oklahoma to see everything that's being done here in this Capitol. And so I welcome those proceedings to start Monday, if that's what this is about. If this is truly about getting to the bottom of those political accusations from the Speaker's office, let's have the impeachment hearings and let's lay them all out for everybody to see. Let's not say that there's going to be a loft hearing that starts some period in the future. Let's not call it different things. We know what they're trying to do here. It is obvious. As a matter of fact, it was declared by Randy Weingarten 2 months ago. The head of the National Teachers Union put my picture on stage and drew a target over me and said they were coming after me. 6 weeks later, you see the Speaker, Charles McCall, through his surrogate, Mark McBride, launch these political attacks on me. I will not back down to the teachers union. I will never apologize for fighting for Oklahoma families. I will never apologize for ending woke indoctrination in our schools. I will never apologize for bringing the Bible back to the classroom. I will never apologize for fighting for school choice. I will never apologize for fighting for the parents of Oklahoma. And so that is my demand of the Speaker. In the political gamesmanship, in the fake political attacks, in the fake controversies, if you have any evidence for these lies, provide them over to Senate leadership, and let's start that impeachment investigation Monday morning.
That's right. Superintendent Walters wants it fast and hard. He wants McCall and the entire House of Representatives to get up in there and investigate. Hold an impeachment. I know that I'm being weirdly raunchy about this because it's my coping mechanism apparently this weekend. I don't know. But wow. Right? When effectively Walters is saying, oh, you want to investigate me? Then do it harder. Do it fast. Do it right now. Don't do a committee investigation. Just go ahead and impeach me. Which is, he's trying to one up, or he's trying to call McCall's bluff, right? Because I think that Walters thinks that McCall's not going to do it, and he might not. And this is the thing that we just don't know yet, right? Some of this Walters might be right. There was a letter published, I think last night, that Walters has sent to McCall that cited a bunch of laws and explained a bunch of this stuff. And when I read it, I was like, well, this makes some sense. It was not incisive in any way. It was like a normal email response, which alone was weird. But there's a chance, right, that the things that the House is looking at about Walters as it pertains to money, that maybe Walters is telling the truth. There's a lot of consternation, a lot of frustration, a lot of anger and outrage even by House Republicans and certainly House Democrats about Ryan Walters. But we don't yet know how much of that has crossed the line into actual neglect of duties or malfeasance, right? I don't think he's actually been embezzling money or something that would be a clear violation of the law and would put him in a bad spot. But it might just be incompetence. There is a scenario here where Walters was such a bad leader that a lot of his staff left because he was kind of a dick, right? I don't know. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying this is a scenario where he was a bad leader. People didn't respect him, didn't like him, and they left. They got other jobs. And then the department's understaffed. Walters doesn't really know what he's doing. He doesn't have experts on the team to help things keep going. And so maybe they didn't apply for some federal grants. And he might couch it being oh, well, we're just, rejecting that federal money because we don't need it. But maybe he just forgot. And he doesn't know how to say I'm sorry. And he knows that it's a huge fuck up. And so rather than take ownership of his mistakes, he is getting angry at other people for pointing out those mistakes, right? That's reaction formation. That's a defense mechanism. And so now he's like, no, this is not okay. And trying to point the finger at somebody else and deflect to somebody else. And an easy person to point to is Speaker McCall, who Walters, I think, correctly identifies is planning to run for governor in 2026. And yes, Speaker McCall has a political calculation to make around how he handles an impeachment. Now, the other thing you may have noticed early on in that interview clip is that Walters is talking about McCall running for governor, and he says it's clear that McCall has identified who his greatest threat is in the governor's race. And he's talking about himself, right? And so what you don't hear is the first question for the media after Walters finished speaking at that press conference was, is this you announcing that you're running for governor? Because he very clearly said everything except for I am running for governor. And so he had to kind of quickly deflect. I wasn't even clear if he expected that question, although he definitely should have been. But he kind of deflected. It was like, no, I'm not worried about future office. I'm not even thinking about that. I'm thinking about Oklahoma's kids or whatever. Kind of a typical talking point to pivot to. But I did think that was funny. And that is definitely the case. And if this has come down to a battle between Walters and McCall that is setting the stage for the upcoming gubernatorial election in 2 years, that's one thing. But there's another potential, maybe likely candidate for governor in 2026, and that is Gentner Drummond, right? So not only do we have Walters and McCall, we've got Drummond. And he didn't say anything about Gentner Drummond the entire press conference. He didn't address the Open Records Act or Open Meeting Act potential violations. That was notably absent from his comments, right? This was very clearly like a political statement trying to call out someone else's political statements, right? And I think if I was Speaker McCall, I think at this point I would do the same thing. I would say, listen, there's a lot we don't know yet. I'm not going to call for impeachment, right? Unless I have an overwhelming majority of legislators that are willing to do that. In which case, politically, I've got to kind of listen to the body. But at this point, I don't have that. I've got some, right? I've got a bunch of Democrats and a few Republicans who are calling for impeachment, or at least an investigation. And so, yeah, let's use LOFT. That's their whole deal, right? LOFT stands for Legislative Office of Fiscal Transparency. Well, let's let them investigate and see what they turn up. And it's going to take a few months to do that investigation. And that investigation might lead to an audit by the state auditor's office. And that's going to take several more months. And by then we'll be in the middle of session next year. And if we need to handle it then, we can do. But that gets us past this election cycle. It allows all of us to do something, in air quotes, right? We can do something about Ryan Walters, that we're working the process, we're doing it. And then next year, after the election, when McCall is out of office, right? It gets him off the hook, and then it's Hilbert's deal. And I think probably there is some professional respect here where McCall doesn't want to be in the limelight when he is on his way out, right? Then a few months, he's out. He's done. He's terms out. He doesn't have to worry about what the House is doing. And he doesn't want to encumber the next legislature under the leadership of Kyle Hilbert, presumably. He doesn't want to encumber him with something unless Hilbert is willing to take on that mantle. And maybe he is. His comments indicate that he certainly might be. But I think there's a really interesting nuance to the political path here for how it affects McCall, who's leaving office, McBride, who's leaving office, right? Wallace, who's leaving office. All these guys, they're all out. And then Greg Treat in the Senate, you haven't heard much from, right? He said today, put out a statement, was okay, yeah, we're going to hold back because the Senate would have to be the jury. We'll let the Senate staffers do their duty with LOFT, but the Senate's probably not going to make many statements about this because it would be improper, which is fair. Well, that's fair, right? And then you've got whatever's happening with Drummond. Now, to be clear, there will very likely be other Republican candidates for governor in 2026, right? Congressman Kevin Hern is rumored to run. I'm sure there will be some others, right? You think back to 2018 when Stitt ran, there was 5 or 6 or 7 Republicans who ran really across the gamut, plus some Democrats and some independents and a libertarian. Like, it'll be a crowded ballot. That primary election by itself will be a big deal. Man, I bet a lot of Republicans wish we had open primaries so that they had an opportunity to appeal to a broader swath of the electorate and not just the fervent, frothy few who are the most partisan in their caucus and might be more likely to align with someone like Ryan Walters, who uses press conferences like today to get an extra press hit over the weekend, to have his face on the television, to say the things he wants to say and have it be covered. That was a long clip that was like 5 minutes that I played. That was from like News 9. Like, every news station was there. There was nobody else in the building. OETA was there. All the print media was like, he had the run. And I only saw one other legislator, Andy Fugate, from, a Democrat from the House, who just happened to be there. There's a lot of folks out campaigning, doing events. It was strategically, it was a great day for a press conference for Ryan Walters. He generally presents well in front of a camera. I think it's funny he wears jeans with his blazer all the time. I know that's a thing, but it's not my thing. I'm not saying I don't do it. I just don't do it all the time. But he was there wearing his uniform, doing the thing, handling the media the way that he knows that he probably can and should if he wants to get ahead in politics in Oklahoma. So, what happens now? I don't know. I've been checking Twitter this whole podcast to see if there was any responses from the Speaker or Hilbert or the Senate, and I haven't seen anything yet. And I kind of don't expect that we will. I think there's a good reason that McCall would just let it slide for right now. Like, there's probably nothing for him to gain from issuing a statement right now, right? Some would argue that allows Walters to control the news cycle and let him have it, right? Like, McCall is a patient man. He's generally someone who waits to see what's happening before he makes a decision to act. And I think he's going to be patient with this. I did think it was interesting, too, that Walters used so much rhetoric about Mark McBride here, really calling him out several times, calling this fake political attacks, and then referring to Speaker McCall and his buddy, Mark McBride. Mark McBride, I don't know what his polling data looks like statewide. I know he's broadly liked or supported by the public education community. He's generally, I think, been a friend to public ed and an advocate for it. And it seemed like Walters was trying to tie McBride's comments, and McBride being the one that was the author, the lead author on that letter, that petition for an inquiry into Walters. So I could see where Walters would see him as his number one enemy, but he's really trying to frame McCall as being close with McBride in this process. And I think that's not exactly how it's come across from McCall, or even from McBride for that matter. McBride was petitioning Speaker saying we should do an investigation. McCall said no. And so for Walters to try to buddy them up, including using the word buddy, seemed like a little bit of a stretch, right? And maybe it resonates, right? I won't be at all surprised if over this weekend you get on social media and you see clips or images of Ryan Walters on cable news outlets talking about this, right? Like, in his press conference, he talked about the National Teachers Union is coming after me. They put my picture on stage. They're coming after me. And then he said, they're not just coming after me, they're coming after Oklahoma parents and their values. And I listen to a lot of this stuff, and I have not seen anything from a teachers union or any other union attacking anyone's values, right? They're generally just advocating for people to be paid a fair wage and for them to have proper support from the agencies and the legislatures that fund them. Nothing about values, right? Like, despite what Walters might say, there's not pornography in schools, right? Although it is ironic to me that he is trying to push to have the Bible be part of curriculum in schools, because I don't know if you've read the Bible, but like, there's some pornographic material in that book, right? Song of Solomon is spicy, right? But who knows? Maybe that's his thing. It's not bad. I don't think my 10-year-old should be reading it, but I don't think it has much to do with Oklahoma history. But I'm not the state superintendent. I'm just a voter like you, who cares a whole lot about the quality of our schools, about the future of our state. And yeah, I have some real concerns right now. But we're working on that, aren't we? That's right. Listeners, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with two quick things. One, I mentioned that Non-Doc's 9th birthday is going to be celebrated later this month. They're having a happy hour in Tulsa on August 29th at American Solera from 5 to 7. And then on September 4th in Oklahoma City at Gayutis on 23rd Street from 5 to 7. So back-to-back weeks, back-to-back happy hours. Go and celebrate. Non-Doc, celebrate all of their reporters, their great work that they've done over the last 9 years. Help them get into year 10. I'm a monthly donor. I suggest you be as well, right? Support your local journalists however you can. Also, support your local civic nonprofits like us, like Let's Fix This. We would love to have your support. You can go to letsfixthis.org/donate and make that donation right now. And we are having just a massive voter registration push for the next 82 days to the election. Well, less than that. The voter registration deadline is October 11th. We're going to push to that. I'm going to send an email out tonight. So I need you to, if you haven't already signed up for our email list, go sign up right now. Listen to this, go sign up. And I tell you what, I will delay this. I will send this email out Sunday morning. You've got the weekend. So I hope that you listen to this as soon as it hits your feed. But we have 12 upcoming voter contact events. Some are us, some are partner organizations. There's 12 on this list right now between now and the end of the year. And we're going to be adding a bunch more. I just got an email from the War Acres Library. They want to do a voter registration drive next month. We need volunteers for that because we're already obligated at a different library. And in the Plaza District, we got a lot of stuff going on. We need you, folks, listeners, sign up. We need your help. If you're not sure how to do it, good news, we're going to do some trainings. We've got 4 voter registration trainings over the next 2 weeks. We're going to have weekly office hours where you can hop on Zoom once a week at least. Hop on, ask me questions. We'll guide you, coach you, help get you resources, what you need, so you can do voter registration in your community. And if you are an organization that wants to do this or a business that wants to do voter registration, hit me up. We would love to give you the training and the resources. I'm sorry, this just in, right as I was about to export the file of this episode, Speaker McCall issued a statement. His statement says, "As Speaker of the House, I remain steadfast in my position. I will not overturn the will of the people, regardless of any demands made. While Superintendent Walters may desire a path towards his own impeachment, my focus is firmly on the Loft investigation into the Oklahoma State Department of Education. The investigation is about ensuring taxpayer dollars are properly allocated, not targeting individuals. It is essential that we understand why school districts are not receiving their required funding. My advice to Superintendent Walters is to prioritize getting resources to Oklahoma schools and improving our state's education rankings, rather than engaging in political theatrics." 10 out of 10, no notes. Excellent statement by Speaker McCall. That was great. He made it about the issues, not about the person, which is the exact opposite of what Walters did, right? And this is certainly not an endorsement in either one. No one's announced their candidacy, but from a purely political perspective, a PR perspective, Walters spent a long time in his press conference talking about Speaker McCall and Mark McBride, and that he didn't mention Democrats, which I thought was interesting, but he really focused on those two individuals and about this impeachment investigation. It was like, come at me, bro, right? Like, just come on, go ahead, investigate. I dare you. Look into me, see what's up. And McCall was like, man, listen, chill out. We're going to investigate. We'll get to the bottom of this. And when we do, then we'll take it from there, like one step at a time, but made it about the issues. And I think we can all agree, right? We definitely should be, and we wish Superintendent Walters was focused on ensuring that our kids have enough money and resources in their schools to give them the best education they could possibly get. And so I think I'm going to leave it again with the same scene from The West Wing, where Sam Seaborn is talking about education.
Education is the silver bullet. Education is everything. We don't need little changes. We need gigantic, monumental changes. Schools should be palaces. The competition for the best teachers should be fierce. They should be making six-figure salaries. Schools should be incredibly expensive for government and absolutely free of charge to its citizens, just like national defense. That's my position. I just haven't figured out how to do it yet.
Let's fucking go, Oklahoma. We've got this. You've got this. 82 days to the election. Get out and vote. Tell your friends. Bring your grandma. Let's make it happen. We can fix this.